which is an add-on to our BCA green mark scheme. So, sorry, let me just minimize our faces. So the health and wellbeing section looks at the design, construction, operation, and retrofit of buildings that facilitate mental, physical, and social well-being of their occupants. On average, we spend more than 90% of our time within buildings, which is why designing for health and wellness is increasingly important. So the health and wellbeing badge is broken down into 3 main chapters. The first being physiological, which looks at physical well-being, then psychological, which looks at mental well-being, and then sociological, which looks at social well-being. So sociological, or physiological rather, hopes to encourage movement, improve health through the use of safe materials, and increase comfort through air quality control and temperature. Now, at this point, it's worth noticing that this is a points-based system with points attributed to each of the successful inclusions of the items listed here. So within physiological, we look at things like active mobility, active interiors, material emissions, thermal comfort, fresh air provision, and clean air. So I think what you'll notice here is that a lot of the things that I'll be talking about will cross over with Justin's presentation. So I'm sure you'll be very aware of a lot of these items already. Moving on to psychological, this encourages connection to nature, improves health through the consideration of circadian rhythm, and increases comfort through thoughtful soundscape design. As said, sociological looks at social well-being, and it hopes to encourage meaningful relationships by providing community spaces, and also improves health through promoting wellness programs, external facilities, and provision of healthy eating facilities. In the next few slides, we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail, and we've illustrated the points that you could achieve by looking at a school. So we've imagined the wellbeing school of the future. Okay, so this is physiological, and the first point is looking at active movement design. The top image is really talking about how you access your building, whether it be a school or an office or a residential development. It doesn't make an awful lot of difference here. But we're talking about doing it in an active way, whether that's through walking or through using cycle lanes, but anything really that gets you out of your car. Then, when you arrive at your destination, you'll need secure and sheltered cycle storage. So this is somewhere to lock up your bike safely, and maybe a locker to put your sports clothes or your sweaty clothes after your ride. And then lastly, shower and changing and locker facilities. So these are your end of trip facilities. So there are 2 points in total for this section. And considering that we are proposing to provide all 3 of these, we have given ourselves 2 points out of 2. The next item is about active interiors. So we come inside the building now, and here, if you provide active staircases rather than using lifts or travelators, this can be really beneficial. And so you get a single point for that. Whenever you're in the rooms themselves, we talk about active furnishing. This is obviously easier to do in an office or a school-like setting because you might have a seated desk, a standing desk, or a group sitting setting for discussion. So this could be a few couches in the corner of a room. And so if you provide active furnishing and staircases, you can gain up to 2 points for active interiors. The next item is on material emissions. And the idea here is that we try to keep volatile organic compounds as low as possible. Inside the health and wellbeing badge, there are tables that give you lists of how many volatile organic compounds can be emitted. And so this spec will be in your material sheets. So here we look at low VOCs for our furnishings, low VOCs for our wall coverings and our lacquers, and even down to our built-in carpentry. So if you meet the requirements needed, you can get 1 point for this. The next element is about air quality and comfort, and also thermal control. So here it's really about having personal control over your environment. So if there is a window that you can open within your space, or even a door, that's beneficial. A ceiling fan that can be turned on those extra hot days, and even desk fans for even more personal control. You can also gain points for having effective cross ventilation. Now, I know in a lot of our larger buildings, offices, schools, this isn't always possible. We quite often have double loaded corridors. But if you are able to get effective cross ventilation, then you can gain points for this also. Another point on our air quality and fresh air provision is about air purging systems. So if you're able to purge the air of all the high CO2 levels, this can be beneficial for our overall sense of well-being, our health, and even our concentration levels when we're thinking about buildings such as schools and offices. You can also bring in an IAQ auditor who can look at the quality of the air. And lastly, so for air quality and comfort, fresh air provision, there's about 4.5 points. This is quite an involved section. Now we move on to psychological. So this is about our mental well-being. And one of the main points here is about access to nature. You can see we've got about 3 points for this, and they give you a number of different ways in which you can gain these points. One would be having accessible planted courtyards. Another might be accessible planted sky terraces. And then when you move inside the building, you can have fixed indoor planting. So fixed indoor planting really refers to things such as green walls, things which can't be just shifted out should they start to look a little brown. So it's really about inbuilt structures rather than, say, pot plants. And lastly, even a view onto nature can be really beneficial. So if any of your classrooms, offices, or your residential, in fact, had a view out onto trees, onto green, that can be really beneficial for your mental well-being. Now we're looking at circadian rhythms. I know this is a really important point in Justin's project, looking at their house, but it's also really important in offices and schools. So here we can see one of the most important things is to have a link to the circadian rhythms through natural light. So large windows so you can see the changing light conditions outside. And then to supplement that, we have our main building lighting, which is following circadian rhythms. So warmer in the mornings and the evenings, and then brighter towards the center of the day, and even circadian task lighting. Now, what this is going to do is just help you to be more in tune with nature, and it's said that it improves your the quality of your sleep. And we all know how important sleep is for our everyday functioning. So the next point is on sound and soundscape design. So even from a space planning point of view, it's important that we consider sound and where we place our sensitive spaces. So for example, in our school, our imagined school here, we're talking about our classrooms. Our classrooms are places where we have to think and concentrate. So if we're able to orientate those buildings, or sorry, those rooms away from noisy external sources, such as large roads, then that would be beneficial. If that's not possible, if we're on a very tight site, as they often are in Singapore, what we try to do is provide sound barriers. So these can be natural, using things such as trees, hedgerows, bushes to try and create a sound barrier. Or we can employ more architectural features such as walls and fences. When we move inside our building, sound also plays an important role, especially in large spaces which have a lot of through traffic, a lot of people moving about, talking, and one such space is your main atrium or lobby. These tend to be quite grand spaces with high ceilings, not a lot of furnishing, so a lot of echoes and noise, which can be quite uncomfortable, even if you're just passing through, but more so for the support staff potentially on your front desks. And what we can do is, it sounds counterintuitive, but we can add additional sound to that space, such as a waterfall. And this creates a positive soundscape. So this is background noise, which helps to drown out some of the more jarring sounds. It wouldn't have to be anything as large necessarily as a waterfall. It could just be a small water feature in the corner of the room. And for this item, there are 1.5 points that can be gained. When we come inside our smaller rooms, as I mentioned, we have taken a school as our example here. So this is a typical classroom, and there are a number of ways that we can dampen extraneous sounds, such as echoes and clattering. The first being using carpeting on our floors rather than a hard floor. This will dampen footfall sounds. We can use cork or acoustic panels, which are material on our walls, because they will also help to absorb sound. And the same goes for our ceiling. So we can use timber baffles or even soft materials and green materials. So again, there's 1.5 points for this item. We move on now to sociological, which is about our social well-being. And the first part is about being inclusive. Now, BCA already have their universal design mark, which covers inclusivity in a very detailed manner. So rather than recovering it here within green mark, they say that you can have 2 points if you meet gold or gold plus universal design mark. So another thing which you can do to gain a further 2 points is to include communal spaces or restorative spaces within your building. So if you had a room which could be multifunctional, this could be perfect. So inside here, you could do things such as yoga or group meditation, and this would garner you 1 point, really, for the sociological part. You can also include community spaces on the outside of your building. In this example, we've shown a play park, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be a play park. It could be as simple as some bench seating or, a bench seating or somewhere nice to sit and think. Moving on, these communal spaces are not just for those who are simply visitors to your building or the main customer of your building. It's also for the people who work there. After all, they are the ones that will be spending the most time within this space. So here we want to create a comfortable space for the people who work in the building. So this is an example here. We've got somewhere comfortable to sit. We've got good lighting. We've got views to the exterior. We have amenities such as a water cooler and lockers in order to store your belongings whilst you're working. So if you do all of this, you can gain 1 point. So as I mentioned before, we want to promote physical activity and mental wellness. And part of that is about being physical. Now here in this example, we've showed a gym, but again, it doesn't need to be. It could be a space for doing yoga. It could be a space for doing aerobics, anything that really gets your heart pumping a little bit. And if it can be done in a communal setting with your friends, with your colleagues, then even better. So other health and well-being promotions could involve healthy eating. So the bottom image here just shows a typical canteen within a school. But what we're saying here is that there should be healthy eating options, whether that's vegetarian or salads, or just leaving the greasy fried food off the menu. That would be enough to get some of the points here. Above, going the extra mile, we've included a kitchen garden. So it would be possible to actually grow organic, healthy vegetables and have them served within the canteen of your building. And if you do things like this, you could gain up to 1.5 points. So the last section is on innovation. Now, they don't prescribe anything in detail for innovation, but obviously it must be innovative and it must help health and well-being. So the first example that we've thought of is about including measuring and monitoring systems within our building. So this would show us how much energy we're using, or rather how much we're saving and producing. And so we can feel better that our building and our activities within that building are not adding to the global climate crisis. Moving on, another innovative idea is to have external workspaces, which could be a library. So here you're out in the fresh air, you have a view onto nature, whilst also being involved in your day-to-day tasks, such as, well, in this case, it's a school, so study, reading, and in discussions with your teachers and friends. Lastly, we're showing workspaces within the kitchen garden. So again, it's about being outdoors and have these interesting flexible working spaces. And this could also be done in a courtyard. I think what we're showing here is the rain screen cover at the top here, ensuring that it could be used 365 days a year, even during Singapore's inclement weather. You could still get out and enjoy yourself in the fresh air. So that's the end of the health and well-being portion. I have a final slide here, which I believe Kailas would like to go on to describe a little. Do you want to share yourself, Kailas, or should I stop sharing?
I'll let you continue, Carl. Thanks, that was a really interesting presentation. Okay. Thanks for that. I noticed you scored 4 marks for all the points, so well done on that.
Well, yeah, thank you very much.